What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Philly Experience Podcast here. We're down a man today. It's T working hard, but Tanner and I will take you the rest of the way today. And guys, I got to tell you, there's a lot to get to. 4 sports this week we want to touch on. The Eagles obviously hiring their new head coach, Nick Sirianni. The Sixers playing only 2 games this past week because of a COVID scare. The Philadelphia Phillies still have not signed JT Realmuto yet. And now there's rumors out there that the Braves possibly are in on the JT Realmuto sweepstakes, and as well the Flyers playing great hockey, productive week against the Boston Bruins and against the Buffalo Sabres. So a lot to get to today. We want to roll it and open and lead in with the Nick Sirianni hire. Both of us really don't know much about Nick Sirianni other than he's under Frank Reich, or at least coached with him under the umbrella last season in Indianapolis. So Tanner, what's your first thoughts when you heard the hire about Nick Sirianni?
Well, my first thought was I would have rather had McDaniels. That was just my opinion. I think he would have done maybe I was more positive in his effect that he could be on the team. But as I looked into Sirianni more, he has a lot of experience working with quarterbacks, and that's exactly what this team needs right now. Jeff Lurie, he's made it sure that these coaches know that they're going to be trying to fix Carson Wentz, and that's their main objective. So with bringing Sirianni in and his experience with quarterbacks, that's definitely going to help. It also opens the door to a Jalen Hurts trade. I know I didn't want to hear that personally, but you brought it up. NT brought it up too in past episodes that might be the way to go to keep Carson Wentz due to the money and everything like that. And it looks like it's more leaning towards that, the way that they got rid of Doug Peterson in favor of Carson Wentz earlier. So I'm leaning towards that we're just going to see Carson Wentz back here at the helm of the team.
Yeah, Nick Sirianni hired in the NFL in 2009, actually hired with the Kansas City Chiefs the same year as Field Yates, fantasy football expert. Put air quotes around that. But now this guy, he's got a ton of experience, like you said. Started out in 2009. He was a wide receivers coach, which I think is a key because our receivers really aren't that great right now. Maybe he can come in and have sort of, groom them even more, maybe have some sort of draft impact as well. And he's under Frank Reich last season, even multiple seasons since 2018. So, if we can't get Frank Reich back, get the next best thing, I guess, in this situation. He's an offensive-minded coach. Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman obviously want to bring Carson Wentz back. I think that's been known in the in the interview discussions that they've had with all their candidates, which there's been a lot. I think it came down to Nick Sirianni and Josh McDaniels, like you mentioned. Personally, I don't have too much of an opinion on this guy because I felt like even no matter who we hired, I would have just had like a shrug my shoulders type of attitude because, a lot of these guys aren't super proven, especially Josh McDaniels. Even his one stint as a head coach in Denver didn't go well at all. But personally, I think this guy, he's young, which is good. He's an innovative mind, fresh face in the locker room. But the one concern could be, is he just going to be a yes man for Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie?
Yeah, that's what he's going to do. I said it last episode that this team's going to be looking for a young coach that hasn't had comfort at the head coach position, so they can kind of boss him around. And we go to Sirianni. I believe he's 39. That makes him the youngest Eagles coach, I think. And so this is going to be, I think personally, it's going to be a little bit of a rough start for the Eagles. You have a young head coach. You're dealing with the effects of Carson Wentz's last season, where he did not perform well, as we all know. And now you have Jalen Hurts too. Also, this isn't going to be good for Jalen Hurts because this guy's obviously a competitor. He made it so he wants this to be his team, and now he sees that there's a new head coach, and that head coach's his mission is going to be to fix Carson Wentz first. Now, Jalen Hurts, this is going to make him mad, and I think Jalen Hurts is going to ask for a trade.
Quite possibly. I think personally, the reason being for that is because he played 4 games last year, right? NFL teams have his tape, or be able to pull up his tape of past games this season. If he just sat the whole season as a backup quarterback, he might not have as much of an urge to force his way out of Philadelphia and just stay back there behind Carson Wentz. But yeah, I definitely agree. There has to be a trade in the works, especially if you're going to roll with Carson. He doesn't like having Hurts breathing down his neck, especially because Hurts played decent in those 4 games to end this past season. So I don't know, but Nick Sirianni is a good hire in my opinion. I don't think it's a bad one. I really didn't think you could have a bad hire because of the fact that there's so many offensive options out there, only a few defensive options. But I personally think if you're going to roll into next season trying to fix Carson Wentz as your number one priority, you need to have an offensive minded coach. So they got that. Now, how much say do you think he'll have with draft positioning and draft choices? Because Howie Roseman being the general manager and Jeffrey Lurie kind of wanting to get his hands on this team more than the owner should, in my opinion. Do you think that this guy is going to be brought in here and be another Doug Peterson and not have as much of say with player personnel and draft choices and things like that?
Well, he's definitely going to be involved in the conversation, but I think they're just going to use it as advice for Jeffrey Lurie and Howie when they're really looking at these guys to draft. And of course, you have the scouts and everything like that. But he's not going to play a big role this season. But I think depending on how the season goes, his first coaching season goes, I think it's gonna he's gonna move up in the importance of drafting. But right now, as we said, Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, they got this guy so they could tell him what to do.
Yeah, Howie Roseman, probably the bigger problem or the biggest problem with this team, in my opinion, personally. You have a quarterback that's proven and then kind of went downhill in Carson Wentz. You have a backup quarterback who stepped on the field, had a nice couple of flashes, but is he they're going to be the leader of the future? You don't know. You have a coach that had a fractured relationship with Carson Wentz, didn't have any say from the front office. So I feel like Doug was almost sandwiched in between a rock and a hard place. He had on one end Carson Wentz, who really didn't like him personally, Doug Peterson behind the scenes. And then you had general manager and owner that wouldn't give Doug as much say or as much, control of, personnel and maneuvers and moves, just basic general moves with the team. So that's why Doug basically got forced out of Philadelphia, in my opinion. And then you have Howie Roseman, who's probably the bigger issue here. We have a terrible cap situation. He hasn't produced well through the NFL draft, free agent signings, trades. Even Darius Slay didn't have his best season last year. I mean, he doesn't really have anything to point to within the last year or two that's a really solid option. Now, Carson Wentz, from his standpoint, he really declined. And now Howie Roseman himself is now pointing to the fact that he drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round. And, he's using that as a chip, I think, because of the fact that Carson was so terrible. But my question to you is if Howie Roseman is going to point to Jalen Hurts and say, yeah, that's why I drafted Jalen Hurts for a situation like this. And now Hurts steps in and produced pretty well. But at the same time, they're going into these interviews saying to these candidates, we think that Carson Wentz is our guy going forward. So, you got to pick a side here. Which one is it?
Well, I personally think that Howie Roseman's doing this because he does not want to get fired. Um, we all know that when Jalen Hurts was doing well, Howie Roseman was over there saying, "See, I told you so. This is why I drafted Jalen Hurts." Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, they have a relationship that really helped Howie Roseman not get fired. And I can't believe, we're still talking about how Howie Roseman's on this team and Doug
Mhm.
Peterson is not. I think both of them should have been gone. It not to say that of course they'd find another job. I believe Doug Peterson's taking a year off from coaching, but that to me is Howie Roseman just following along with Jeffrey Lurie now because Jeffrey Lurie he's got the final say. He owns this team. He's the owner, and you and I could go back and forth with this all day. But we're gonna welcome back a caller, Suf from Lansdale. How you doing?
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Very well, Sue. We want to get your opinion on this Eagles new hire at head coach position. We just discussed on the show about how, Nick Sirianni, offensive minded coach, worked under Frank Reich trying to fix Carson Wentz. List of things goes on and on. Now, is it going to be productive? Is it not? We don't know. But, what's your thoughts on the new hire?
So I'm going to be 100% honest. I had no clue who Nick Sirianni was before we signed him. And to be honest, his name wasn't really floating around until the moment that he was ultimately given the position.
Right.
Um, so it was kind of like, hey, he's coming from a good organization. He's coming from Frank Reich, who used to be obviously our offensive coordinator. Yeah, we won a Super Bowl, so of course he's coming from a well-rounded background, and that I have to be thankful for. But also at the same time, I feel like Eric Bieniemy, of the Chiefs offensive coordinator, I feel as if he was a better candidate, and I was kind of upset that we didn't end up picking him up because I actually read a report that Nick Sirianni wasn't calling the plays in Indianapolis as much as Eric Bieniemy was calling for the Chiefs.
Right.
So I mean, it makes me a little bit nervous. But I mean, listen, you see coaches like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. Look, they both turn their organizations around. So I mean, we bringing in this young guy. I mean, he appears to know be well rounded in football and appears to work really well with quarterbacks. So I'm optimistic. That's really the most I can honestly say. But this only I'm more concerned about defensive coordinator. Who are we going to go for that position? Yet I haven't really looked too much into it, and I haven't heard too much about it. But that's what's really I'm really more focused on that because I feel like it was so many good head coach candidates out there. I would have been fine pretty much with whomever we would have went with ultimately, but this offensive and defensive coordinator positions need to be filled as well. So that makes me wonder where we're going to go forward with this process.
Right. Yeah, and I think it would have been a perfect situation to have yet another coach that coached under Andy Reid as our head coach. But you look back to last week's playoff, and mostly all of those coaches were coached under Andy Reid at some point in their time. So, do you think that Jalen Hurts is going to stay on this team if Carson Wentz is named starter?
Absolutely not. It doesn't really make much sense to keep Jalen Hurts on his team because you got a young guy in here who came in and made plays and was performing. Honestly, for a rookie to come in pretty much at the end of the season and perform the way he did, he deserves the starting spot. I mean, if you have Dwayne Haskins getting signed by the Steelers, then there's definitely a possibility that there's teams out there that are willing to trade for Hurts, and I'm pretty sure that Hurts probably holds mid to late first round pick value.
I agree with you, Swoop. I want to ask you about the Colts and try to focus on them for a second here. Obviously, making the playoffs, losing a close game in Buffalo, which is a tough environment, even though there's no fans. They had Philip Rivers, a veteran guy, but maybe not the most mobile quarterback in the world. Solid running attack with Jonathan Taylor, good weapons on the outside with Michael Pittman and T.Y. Hilton, and one of the best offensive lines in football. So, the Colts had a pretty solid, pretty stout offense, well-rounded offense in general. So does that give you any confidence coming in with maybe, a less talented offensive scheme or offensive roster as a whole? Does that give you any confidence that he can, even though he didn't call plays, maybe he can take a step forward in a year or two with our offensive weapons, depending on who we get in the draft?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, the Eagles are all we have is really young guys at our wideouts and at running back, and pretty much at quarterback too. I mean, because Wentz missed so much time that I feel like there's still a lot that he can learn. I feel like he's not mentally mature. I'm not going to say enough, but at the level that he should be. So it's still a lot that Wentz could definitely learn, and we've seen his potential, and it's still, obviously correct his mistakes. Because I'm not going to say they were minor, but these are just mental errors that could be fixed. So working with, this guy and seeing how well Philip Rivers performed after having not performed that well in years, it gives me a lot of optimism for Wentz. Like maybe we could actually turn this around because Philip Rivers, I personally, just the fact that he came that close, to making the AFC championship, because that's the past years he struggled just to make the playoffs. So it just felt it was a feel good moment seeing him make it that far to end his career, and just the fact that they have Jonathan Taylor as I think he was number 3 in all time rushing not all time, excuse me, rushing yards this season. That gives me a lot of optimism as well because I feel like Miles Sanders is a better running back than Jonathan Taylor is. So I mean, if we could get a better running game going and better passing attack going, we got a squad here. I mean, it definitely comes down to us drafting a wide receiver with our 6th pick. But I'm optimistic, man. It's because I feel like in order to be, at least it seems as if the young coaches in this league are starting to become a lot more successful.
So my final question for you, and then I'll throw it back to Tanner real fast. Doug Peterson, these rumors came out. Carson Wentz was trying to sabotage the team, maybe with play calling, checking at the line of scrimmage. Even though Doug Peterson may have called a run play, Wentz would throw it into a passing play or twist it into a passing play, whatever word you want to use for it. What's your thoughts on that? Is Carson Wentz maybe trying to sabotage Doug to get him out of town? Is this a false rumor? What do you think was going on there?
It's honestly hard to say because obviously none of us are there,
Mhm.
and I'm not one to really backbite or try to you know go with the rumors, but I noticed how Doug didn't take a liking to Wentz when Mike Groh was fired last season. So I feel as if that turmoil had to go into effect this season between those two. Um, but at least I can't really say I can't see Wentz really sabotaging you know Doug Peterson's job as well as the Eagles franchise's future just based off his dislike he may have for Doug Peterson. I personally can't see that, so I just say that's rumors and can't roll with that. But yeah, that's those are my beliefs personally.
Yeah, definitely drama haunts this locker room for the past couple of seasons. It's been haunting this locker room, whether it's Carson Wentz isn't a team player, which you can start to maybe look back at these accusations that Carson Wentz was not a team player and he didn't get along with some teammates. At the time, we thought maybe this can't be true. Carson Wentz, he's a great guy and all, but we won't really know until we're there in that locker room and we don't know what's said in there and what's done in there. So we're just gonna have to see what happens. Like Suf said, you can't really follow with the drama. Sometimes the media does this to part teams. Thank you so much, Suf, for calling in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Swoop.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
All right, Tanner. I want to move on here because we got a lot to get to. We definitely wanted to lead in with that hire. But now I want to move into the 76ers squad. Touch on their, COVID scare, whatever you want to call it. I know it was the Memphis team that actually had, I think, maybe a couple positive tests or contact tracing. But obviously losing a shorthanded game on the road in Memphis without Joel Embiid, you know, without Joel Embiid this year, this team's record is not good. I mean, and we expected that probably, but with him, it takes us to a whole nother level, arguably top two, top three, whatever you want to put it in the Eastern Conference. And then him coming out the other night against Boston, dropping 42 points, 10 rebounds. I think it was like his 10th or 11th career 40 and 10 game. So when Joel Embiid's on the floor, we know that we can compete with anybody in the Eastern Conference, even the Brooklyn Nets, in my opinion, at least compete with them. Now, going forward here, playing pretty weak opponents up until this point, and also not really fully healthy. Even Seth Curry still remains, on the shelf with him getting his conditioning back and whatnot. But your thoughts in this quick two games this week. Does Embiid's performance against the Celtics without Jason Tatum, mind you, does that give you any sort of confidence against good teams going forward?
Well, I'll tell you what, Max. I'll start with this. I'm not confident in the Sixers team. I thought I was. I thought I thought if Joel Embiid's out, it's fine. We got Dwight Howard. We got this bench, and we could still got Ben Simmons, so we're fine. But as you mentioned, these games, the Sixers definitely play better with Joel Embiid. He's getting 40 plus points. And then you look at Ben Simmons, and he gets 11 points. I think the last two games he got 11 points, and it's not him that steps up; it's Shake Milton. You got guys like Tobias Harris. He's playing his part so far on this team. He's been picking up the pace since last season. So I'm really not confident in this team. I'd like to be because I heard rumors like maybe 4 weeks ago that this team was just smoke and mirrors and they're not as good as we think. And then we hit that losing streak because of the COVID, the postponements, and the only playing with 8 guys. And so it's been rough for this team going forward. And I'm really looking to see, of course, Joel Embiid back playing like he did last game against the Celtics. That's a big game. It's the Celtics. But now we have a team to worry about in the Nets. They did lose in that double overtime, I believe, with
Yep.
Kyrie back for the first time, all three of them playing together. And Kyrie had a good game. Um, so it didn't really affect him with the drama. And I'm hoping that this team can pick it up.
Tobias Harris having a great season, in my opinion. I think I'm higher on Tobias Harris this year than most people in the Philadelphia area, mostly because I expect him to continue this into the playoffs. A lot of people need to see that first. But the way I'm seeing Tobias Harris play this year, more aggressive, more of taking on that leadership role, almost even more than Ben Simmons has, based off on production on the court. Tobias Harris averaging 19 points a game, almost around 20, which is awesome. He was down, I think, a little bit lower than that last season, maybe taking more shots this year too, which you like to see. His 3-point percentage is definitely a lot higher. Joel Embiid leading the team, what you expect with 24 points a game. But there's 6 players on this team averaging double figures. Ben Simmons is actually 5th on this list. You have Shake, who actually comes off the bench, averaging more points per game than Ben Simmons is. You have Seth Curry, maybe it's a little inflated because he hasn't played as many games. Tyrese Maxey averaging 10.6 points per game. There's a lot of players that are producing on this team. That's one of the reasons why they're first in the Eastern Conference right now. But Ben Simmons, I personally have been a Ben Simmons fan, and I've backed him. But to take this next step, right? We cleared out the coach and Brett Brown. We got shooters in with Danny Green, Seth Curry. Furkan Korkmaz has been out, but we have Isaiah Joe who stepped up. Now Furkan's back. The bench and the role players are playing their part, like you mentioned with Tobias Harris. The only player on this team that's not playing their own part is Ben Simmons to this point, and I think he needs to get to that 20-point mark. He's not even being aggressive, and he's driving in the lane, but he's missing those bunny shots, from 2 feet, 3 feet out that he's made in the past. I haven't seen him be aggressive. I haven't seen him go for those big time jam slams or anything like that. It's more of like a back you down, try to give you a little hook shot, and it's rims out. What do you need to see more from Ben Simmons? Let's not even take the jump shot into consideration right now because of the fact that even his 2-point game is pretty poor.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to see him leading this team. He's the leader. He should be the leader of the team. We've seen the maturity that he's shown. And we hoped that this would kind of light up Ben Simmons, the trade rumors to the Rockets. And it seems like it's doing the opposite. Now, look, this team is 4th in pace, and that's one thing that this team was harped on to do better in last season. But this is not a team that should be 22nd in 3-point percentage. It's just not a team. You said we picked up shooters like Seth Curry, Danny Green, got Tobias Harris, Shake Milton, even Joel Embiid. He's knocking down some threes, but this team hasn't performed like they should be. Even though the record, they're 10-5 right now. There's still a lot of improvement that this team needs to make, and I definitely am still looking ahead to see the trades that Daryl Morey's going to put together.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely going to be some moves being made, not just with the Sixers, but with other teams as well. I look at the Boston Celtics, who got a $27.4 million cap exception because of that trade of Gordon Hayward. Now, Danny Ainge, the GM of the Boston Celtics, needs to use that exception by March so they can get close to almost a max player in a trade or sign and trade, a buyout option possibly. And there's multiple options, veteran players that are kind of at the tail end of their careers maybe, but still productive, like a LaMarcus Aldridge or somebody like that. They need a guy inside. We've seen that. Daniel Tice is definitely no match for Joel Embiid. Robert Williams, another guy. Tristan Thompson had no chance against Joel Embiid the other night. So, listen, I want to ask you this question personally through this early season, but I think we can get a good, watching these teams in the past multiple seasons, we can get a good, idea of their talent and where they, match up in the Eastern Conference. Where do you have the Sixers at right now? How confident are you in the seeding and where they match up against the likes of the Bucks, the Nets, the Celtics?
6 or 7. That's what I'm thinking right now. How about you? Is that what?
Me personally, I got them a little bit higher than 6 or 7. But I do see your point. Listen, you had the Miami Heat who haven't been fully healthy. And their last season they got to the NBA Finals. Maybe that was a product of the bubble. But Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and guys like that, when they get healthy, I can definitely see the Sixers fall into around a 5 seed.
Yeah, I just can't go high on the Sixers yet, Max. Season after season, or so we get there on the Sixers. We have that Sixers frenzy. But I just can't do it to myself this year. We already had to deal with the Eagles.
Right.
Our school team wasn't doing good. Now we look to the Sixers. We look to the Sixers to really pick it up, and then the Flyers too.
Yeah, of course. Listen, I think for me personally, I think the Bucks are an overrated basketball team. I think Giannis is not as good as the media puts him out to be. I think he's just an athletic freak, still very, very great player overall and insane defensively. But Chris Middleton as their number 2, Drew Holiday as their number 3. I look at their roster after that. I have no faith in Brook Lopez to stop Joel Embiid in a 7-game series. I think Dante DiVincenzo, me and you are both familiar with him, playing at Villanova. Good player. Hasn't taken that next step yet. Say that again. I'm sorry.
He's a good piece, but he was going to get traded.
Yeah, to Sacramento, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So listen, he's a good player, but listen, I like Shake better. Danny Green as a 3-point shooter, I like. So I'm not. I think people are overrating the Bucks. I'm not saying they're underrating the Sixers, but right now I'm more worried about the Celtics and the Nets than I am the Bucks. How about you?
Yeah, well, the way the Celtics played in the beginning of the game, I don't know. It's really, you mentioned that about the Bucks, and I think they were a little overhyped in the offseason. The moves they were going to make, because they locked in Giannis. You thought this team was going to be a super team,
Right.
maybe with Giannis kind of controlling who flows in, who flows out of this team. It's really up in the air at this point because you got the postponements of COVID, and it just seems like we're going to have to wait a few games until we really know where everyone stands.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, like I mentioned, that Jimmy Butler's been out for a bunch of games. Bam Adebayo as well. They're still not fully healthy yet. The Miami Heat, that is, and Indiana Pacers are dealing with a few injuries. But I still like where the Sixers stack up as long as Joel Embiid can stay healthy. There's a bunch of ifs. Steph Curry getting him back, I think it's going to be a bigger boost than people realize because of his 3-point shooting. So it remains to be seen. Look, it's early on this season. There's still a bunch of games we played ahead, and there's tough opponents come up too. We got the Lakers in a couple games down the road. Our first, big time road trip of the season coming up. I think it's a 4 or 5 game road trip out west. So we'll see. This team's going to be tested, and I have confidence in them right now, maybe more than you do. But I think that's probably just a product of my personality. Always trying to be positive, and but I agree. Listen, their postseason track record is not good. The regular season track record the last year, the year before that, hasn't been good. But I think people aren't giving Doc Rivers enough credit. I think him stepping in here as a coach, these guys, I don't know. It's not every player, but Tobias Harris, you can point to and be like, this is a different Tobias Harris than what we're used to.
I definitely think Doc Rivers is doing a phenomenal job. He had to deal with just 8 players, only really playing 7 of them. Like Scott, he didn't want to play in that first game where
Right.
we had with the league minimum, but he's doing a great job. I'm happy he's here in Philadelphia. I'm confident in him, and I'm confident in this Sixers team. I'm just not overly confident.
I think that's fair because of what they've done to us in the past. Especially last year in the bubble. Joel Embiid, can he maintain that? Conditioning is a big question. Do you like what they're doing? With lightening his load, he didn't travel to Memphis. He didn't travel to Oklahoma City. You don't want to see that, but you definitely want to keep him healthy for the big games coming up down the stretch as the season continues.
Yeah, we're gonna need him for those big games. And like I said, you can relax a little bit more if Joel Embiid doesn't play because Dwight Howard, but that means Ben Simmons is gonna have to step up more. The 11 points a game isn't gonna get it done for this team if Joel Embiid is not playing.
Yeah, Ben Simmons needs to take that next step forward. He hasn't done it yet. And personally, I think time could be ticking. Now, the good thing about Ben Simmons is his defensive ability. And we're going to need him against these good teams. We're going to need him to guard Giannis, even if he doesn't produce offensively. We're going to need him to guard Kevin Durant, even if he doesn't produce offensively. Guys like that, Jason Tatum, we're going to need him to guard, who didn't play in that first game of the series against us. So going forward, even the four-headed monster, I'll make that up. Kemba Walker, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, those guard play and their wings are so talented. That's what scares me, because our wings, other than Tobias Harris, Danny Green, Seth Curry, I don't think they're any match. We're going to need Joel Embiid to really take that next step and just carry this team possibly, even though he's averaging 26 and he's dropped 40 before, and we know he's capable of it. But I think in order to beat the Celtics, especially in a 7-game series, for this example, you're going to need Embiid to drop close to 40 points each game.
Yeah, and until the Sixers get farther, before we switch topics to the Flyers, before the Sixers get farther in the playoffs, I'm forever going to be haunted by that Kawhi shot, unless the Sixers they make it to the finals.
You know what? I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I think that'll be in the back of our minds for the rest of our lives,
Yeah.
especially if we don't make it to the NBA Finals. But let's hope we can. I think what we've seen so far in this early season is definitely encouraging, at least more so than in years past. But like you said, we want to flip to the Flyers here. Probably the best team in Philly sports right now. You can make the argument. 3-1-1 most recently. That overtime loss the other night against the Boston Bruins. So from what you've seen with this team so far, I know we got to give you credit with Travis Konechny. The guy's been hot since he came out of that bubble early on this regular season. You got to like what you're seeing from him. The power play, at least the first unit, has been pretty solid for the most part. Carter Hart had a struggle there against the Buffalo Sabres, gave up 5 goals. And then, obviously have Brian Elliott come in the next game against the Sabres and produces at a high level, 40 shots. So for him to stop 40 shots and have a shutout, Carter Hart the other night bounces back. I'm not going to use that because, we did give up, 4 or 5 goals, whatever you want to say. Personally, I like where this team is at. I know that it's kind of their first road test of the season here in Boston, but, just opening thoughts of what you've seen this past week. The Buffalo Sabres, having that split, obviously, but then, these next upcoming series, again, they're playing 2 series each. It's not going to be an easy road ahead.
But it's just the way that they fell apart in the third period. That's what we got to bring up first. The Bruins, four goals in the third period, right?
Yeah.
And then so obviously they go ahead and they win in the shootout. But Carter Hart, did he have 38 saves in regulation and OT? I believe 28 or 38.
I'll check the stats for you.
38.
38.
But both goalies, they've been putting in their job. I know Carter Hart was taken out for Elliott and Moose. He had a great game. We mentioned that those saves that really put the Flyers above in that game before. And you got to be confident. You mentioned Travis Konechny picking up the pace after that drought he had in the playoffs. And JVR too, 2 goals in the last game's loss. And really, it is to focus on the fall apart in the third period.
Yeah, I want to point out that the injuries too. Morgan Frost, separates his shoulder. Sean Couturier, the same thing. Couturier, you're missing a big chunk of your team right there off the bat in the middle of the ice for your squad. So he's been a big loss early on.
Yeah, those are both also the same kind of hit too that they both suffered through. So that's concerning for their health as well. You look to the training and everything they're doing. You hope everything's all right with that. But yeah, we're missing guys. So these other guys that they're gonna have to step up. Oscar Lindblom coming back from that he had a very challenging time when he wasn't playing. And he's finally back on the ice. Good for him. You love to see him over there playing too. And he's being a part of this team, but you're going to have the other guys to step up. Which guy are you really looking at to step up, Max?
Well, Lindblom's produced 3 points for you so far on the season, working his way back, obviously. But the guy that I'm still looking towards to step up is Claude Giroux. I mean, he has 4 points this season, just scored his first goal against the Bruins the other night. But, he hasn't taken on like that leadership role as far as on the ice production. Now, he might be the vocal guy in the locker room, for example, but for him to not be able to produce at a high level on the ice still concerns me. He's the captain, he's the leader of the team. We have younger guys, probably more talented guys at this point in his career around him, but the media out there still talks about Claude Giroux like he's a top-notch player. I just haven't seen him at that elite or near elite level.
Yeah, Claude Giroux. Well, we're always gonna. He's been on this team for a while.
Yep.
He's the sure captain of this team. But you have guys like Joel Farabee stepping up, playing good, and you liked his play in the opener. Was that him in the opener?
Yeah. Listen, this Joe Farabee is going to be here for a long time. Good, solid player. I think our offensive game is great. I like our defensemen. I think, maybe they try scoring a little bit more than they should and probably focus on defense. But to get offensive production from your defensemen is great. And Carter Hart specifically, not bouncing back, because I hate to use that word bounce back because we did get the loss the other night. But we snuck out a point in overtime. Still first in the East, but again, like the road ahead is pretty tough here. We got the Bruins again. Going forward, I just feel like my one question was, is that game where Carter Hart gave up the 5 goals, would that hurt his confidence? He wasn't able to get the win against Boston the other night, so it still remains to be seen. Do you give Moose more opportunity going forward, even though Hart is your guy?
Well, we mentioned that great game he had. I think you got to give Moose. You got to give him more opportunities. Carter Hart, he's a young guy. He's got to understand that if you don't play the best that you can, you're not going to be playing that next game if someone's better than you in their previous game. So that's to be seen. And for the Flyers, I think the Flyers are the best built Philadelphia team right now.
Yeah.
The depth, the way they're playing, all built together, the coaching and everything. I'm really more confident in the Flyers than I am the Sixers, and especially the Eagles too.
Yeah, look, this team has 7 or 8 guys that have 4 points or more. So I feel like it's a collective production. I think the loss of Couturier really hurts us. And I don't know if people realize that as much. I'm sure, diehard hockey fans do. But for the casual fan out there, this is a guy that's been, assistant captain on this team, and he's been productive. Maybe not from the goal standpoint, but he can score when he needs to. Just a stat sheet stuffer overall. Now, our leading point getter right now is Kevin Hayes. He's been very productive in this early season so far. But the thing about this team that I like is the collective effort overall. I think their defensemen are solid. I just like this hockey team. I'm really excited for the games going forward. They got the Jersey Devils after that, and then you have the New York Islanders. The thing that scares me is that the East is just so tough that you're just going to have to continue to produce and produce and produce. That's why the thing I like about it is the two goalies that we have are capable of going out there and winning the game any single night of the week.
I mean, you got to be confident in the goalies. That's the most important part of
Yeah.
a hockey team, right there. You protect the goalie, and he protects you on the scoring side too.
Yeah, the games have been just different. We got blown out by the Sabres, and then in that second game against Buffalo, you had a close game all the way to the third period, and it was tied 0-0 in the third, and then we just exploded for those 3 goals out of nowhere. We almost flipped the switch and ended up winning the game 3-0. So that's where the shutout came from Moose that night. It was great, but again, to have the sluggish 2 periods of hockey and then punch it into the third and get 3 goals out of nowhere, it's really eye popping.
Yeah, you don't like to see the fall apart at the end. A few other Philly teams, they do that too, and that's to fix. As I
Yeah.
mentioned, confidence in this Flyers team, and I'm glad we were able to get a Flyers conversation without T interrupting that no one cares about hockey.
I agree with that, and I want to add here at the end the other night, falling apart in that third period. That's just it hurts us. It hurts your soul because we had control of that hockey game throughout. Took the 2-0 lead, and then in the third period, the whole debacle happens. Luckily, we were able to get that nice the pass and the cross from Voracek to JVR to punch that thing into OT and get the point on the road. But you don't want to see your team give up 4 goals in one period ever.
I thought Giroux was gonna get the job done with the shootout, but
Yeah, that's another thing, man. He's got to come in the clutch. He's got to bury that.
it had to. I thought it was gonna be his time, but it wasn't. It was good block.
It was a good block. I didn't like the move that he put on there. It looks like he almost stuttered or something right before he took a shot and almost lost his footing a little bit. But you know,
Well,
hindsight's 2020.
He's good with the stick. He knows what he's doing out there, and he's still got a couple more years. So he'll pick it up.
Yeah, I'm confident this team going forward. Next week, we'll have more games to talk about. So we're looking forward to it. Again, rolling through Flyers hockey this season, pretty in depth. So we're looking forward to it. And we want to roll into our last topic of the day here and touch on the Phils off season. Haven't been giving you guys a lot of Phils talk because of the fact that not a lot has been happening. JT Realmuto is still a free agent, still out on the market. We did sign a few relievers. We mentioned Archie Bradley a week or two ago to bolster that bullpen. Dave Dombrowski coming in here, fixing a big problem, at least brought in 2-3 guys in that bullpen to really help us out. Most notably Archie Bradley, but having those guys that have firepower out of the bullpen, be able to throw 95, 96, 97 miles an hour fastball on the gun. These guys are probably going to get strikeouts, we hope, and get much needed outs, not have to rely on Hector Neris and have that one pitch splitter and the guys either swing and miss at it or take it and walk. So, Archie Bradley, I have confidence in these guys. The big thing is still JT Realmuto's on the market. And I don't know why we're not. I feel like a lot of people on social media are, wanting JT back and really, pushing for it. But other people in the media, the so-called experts, they're not 100%, give JT, 120, 130 million. We did offer him 110, and he's still probably wanting more, and rightfully so. That's what the business is about. But 5 years, $110 million, Tanner, that's kind of hard to pass up.
Yeah, and this is a guy that says he wants to play for the Phillies. He
Yeah.
wants in Philadelphia. So I'm confused now. He's putting us through an emotional roller coaster. JT Realmuto, best catcher in the league,
Mhm.
and then just for the Phillies not to have him secured yet, it's so disappointing.
That's the thing, though. We can't rely on Andrew Knapp. Me and you were texting the other day. We can't rely on that Andrew Knapp for 162, let alone 130, whatever it may be. The catcher, I think people don't really value it as much as they should. I mean, this is a guy that is the lead in the league in, throwing people out, trying to steal. He's got the bat. He hits for average. He can steal bases. What catcher do you know out there that can steal you like 15 bags per season? He's got athleticism. He's got skill. He can hit for power. hit for average, whatever you need, almost like a five-tool player. Him with the pitchers, he has a great relationship and a great connection, just like any catcher should on these young guys, veteran guys, in regard to Zach Wheeler specifically. But overall, this guy just brings so much to an organization, almost like a face of a franchise type of player. He has a close relationship with Bryce Harper. You never want to make Bryce mad or upset, just considering he's here for the next like 12, 11 years at this point. So there's so many factors that go into this, but I agree with you. You offer a guy 105 years, 110 million. That's a nice chunk of change, and to still not accept it. And again, I don't want to point too many fingers at him, because it's all about getting the most money. I'm sure his agent's in his ear saying, "Listen, we're going to get you more money. We're going to get you more money." But as you look at all these free agent signings and George Springer signing with the Blue Jays, Michael Brantley goes back to the Astros. There's only two big fish still out there. It's Trevor Bauer and JT Realmuto. I'm just hoping that we can get JT back in a Philly uniform, because that's behind the backstop of the team is so important. I just don't want to lose his production as a whole.
Now, listen, you brought up this guy's name that I just refuse to say, the other catcher on the Phillies team. It just makes me stressed that if we don't have JT Realmuto, we're gonna have this guy to depend on. I got to bring up these stats because the amount of runners that he's left on base when he's at bat, it's absurd. When I'll say his name, when Andrew Knapp is up to bat, I change the channel. When JT Realmuto is up at bat, I put it on all the screens in my house.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see what JT Realmuto is going to do. And if this Phillies team can't get it done, we're going to be 3 steps behind again.
It's a problem because of the fact that our farm system isn't on the more productive side. It's not a strength of our organization, and that's why we're going to have to go out and spend a lot of money in free agency. Luckily, there's not a cap. There's not a cap. Cap ceiling, whatever you want to call it. But there's a luxury tax. Lots of owners don't want to go over that luxury tax, but the Yankees do almost every single year anyway.
Right.
So personally, you're going to have to spend a lot of money in free agency in order to compete with this up and coming division.
And what do the Braves want with JT Realmuto? Come on, they have Travis. They don't
Travis
really
d'Arnaud, yeah.
they don't really need JT Realmuto. They're just doing this in spite. This is a Cowboys and Eagles type thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't think that first of all, if he goes to the Atlanta Braves, just bury me. Just bury me in a casket, because I cannot deal with that. Look, they already have so many high-powered players. They have Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., Freddie Freeman. The list goes on and on. Now they get that rotation, which is pretty stacked too. They're going to have Mike Soroka coming back off the Achilles injury. It's just a lot, man. And the Marlins making the playoffs last year, they're an up-and-coming team with a good manager in Don Mattingly. The Nationals still with that monster of a rotation. It's just so hard to compete, and we lose JT. We're really at the bottom of the division.
It's kind of worrying me how the Marlins have been kind of quiet after the way they performed last season. You said getting into the playoffs
Yeah.
over there, and it's first off, for the Marlins to make the playoffs and the Phillies not to. That's another thing. But the way the Marlins have been quiet in the offseason, not picking anyone up, I'm just curious what their plan is.
Yeah, it's a lot to dive into. I know baseball's still far off. Coming up, obviously, pitchers and catchers report less than a month. Now, is JT Realmuto going to be one of those catchers reporting? Hopefully, the deal gets done soon. But overall, with this team, it's pretty concerning considering the rest of the division. Now, if you're in a weaker division, it wouldn't be as concerning. But because of the fact we have an aging Andrew McCutchen, how much production does McCutchen have left out there in left field? Are we going to have a universal DH this year in both leagues? That would really help us. Personally, I think that McCutchen would benefit a lot from having a DH role here and there during the weeks, because it's a grind, especially last season being cut short. This year, probably going to be a full 162 games. You still have a question mark out in center field. Can Roman Quinn stay healthy? Will Odubel Herrera be back after his incident a few years ago? That's a name that we haven't really thought about in recent memory. Didi Gregorius, will he be re-signed? Obviously, you have Alec Boehm at third base. Will Reese Hoskins be able to give you more production this season like he had back in 2017, 2018? He's fallen off a bit in recent years. Scott Kingery, will he ever be able to take that next step and, hit for power more, maybe get on base in general, maybe walk more, because he's got speed. He's just never on base enough.
Right. It's funny you mentioned Odubel Herrera because he is still involved with this team now. He's not on the 40-man roster or anything like that, but we haven't been able to really shake him yet. He's not part of the Phillies plans in the future. They're just looking for when he's not not around anymore. But we mentioned the farm system for this Phillies team, and we don't quite know how the season's going to go for either all 162 games or what. We're just going to have to wait and see till it gets closer. But this Phillies team, they've been working on their bullpen, but it's just not enough. And we can't get both, I don't think we can get both Didi Gregorius and JT Realmuto back on this team. I think we're going to have to choose JT Realmuto. We're going to have to go all in for him. Didi Gregorius, I believe he's looking for, is it a two-year contract?
Probably more than, because last year you got the 1-year deal, so you would expect to have more years.
Looking for more years on one team. So I don't think we're going to see Didi Gregorius back if JT Realmuto comes back.
That would be tough, because then who plays shortstop for the Phils? I'm not sure. There's a lot of questions to be answered there, and I think one thing that's on our side though is Didi loves playing for Joe Girardi now. I don't know how much money that could shave off. How much is Joe Girardi worth? I guess is the question, but that still remains to be seen. Guys, great show today. If you missed any of this episode, go to philly-experience.simplecast.com. Follow us on Instagram at the Philly Experience Podcast, Apple Podcasts. Again, when the show gets released, Apple Podcasts, you can listen to it there, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So T will be back with us next week. We'll recap everything again with you guys. So stay tuned.